So today's guest, Shaka Smart, needs absolutely no introduction in the basketball world as he is probably one of the most respected basketball coaches in America. In 2009, he got his start as a head coach with VCU, and there he took them to the Final Four in 2011, and probably one of the best Cinderella stories of all time. In 2015, he went to the University of Texas, and then 2021, he took over at Marquette, where they have been one of the top teams in NCAA Division One since he's been there. He was also Coach of the Year in 2023. Now he's known for his fiery, energetic coaching style, as well as how that's reflected in his team's play. But for me, what I think is most impressive about Shaka is the team culture that he creates. Within his team, love is a word that is used frequently, and I would say it's probably demonstrated daily. When teams in college basketball all around the country are losing and recruiting players, they're losing players too, and recruiting players from the transfer portal, Shaka has created a culture that attracts the right people and it keeps the right people as players don't want to leave. Now, over the next two episodes, we will be talking leadership and culture with Shaka. And in this episode, we're going to talk about his influences on his coaching, how his identity has evolved, his approach to team culture time, a lot of unique things in there, the leadership practice of extreme responsibility and how he balances that with letting go of the illusion of control, as well as the value of executive coaching for coaches. And we're going to do a really deep dive into what his morning routine looks like and why it's so important. Welcome to the Coaching Culture Podcast. My name is JP Nervin, and I am joined by my co-host, Nate Sinderson. Our other co-host, Betsy Butterick, sat this interview out. The mission of this podcast is to help you grow as a leader and create a stronger team culture. Now, if you want the notes to this and every episode of the podcast, head on over to tocculture.com and subscribe to our weekly newsletter there. Also there, you can learn more about TOC, our online courses for coaches, my books, The Culture System and the Sports Parent Solution, and the executive coaching services that I offer. All right, now let's get right into the first part of our conversation with Shaka.
All right, Shaka. Well, we certainly appreciate you joining our conversation here today. Done quite a bit of research here over the last week, just listening to interview after interview. And I know we have a limited amount of time, but I want to get you started on this one. One of my favorite questions to ask coaches is kind of get them to reflect a little bit on the influence of their parents on how they coach today. I think sometimes we don't even have an awareness of things that come out of our style that we really took from mom or dad. And you've got a story of coming from a single parent home, and I'm just curious to get us started here. What did you take from just the way your mom raised you that you see come out in your coaching even today?
I'd say my mom's actually my biggest influence in coaching. Even though she had no background in sports, she wasn't an athlete herself, didn't really know anything about basketball, but she taught me so much about relationships, about how to treat people. She taught me a lot about gratitude. She used to make me write thank you notes and thank you cards to my coaches and to my teachers when I was young. And so she had a big impact on the nature of my relationships with my teachers and my coaches as a kid. When I went to college, I chose a school completely because my mom and I both felt really strongly about the coach. Even though I played Division III basketball, it's pretty crazy thinking back on it. But yeah, she impacted me a lot. And even when I became an adult and got into coaching, I remember as an assistant coach, she's always taken such an interest in our teams and our players. And I remember being at Akron, University of Akron, one of my stops as an assistant coach, and she felt like we needed better leadership on our team. And so we were sitting together in my apartment in my living room, and she was helping me create a leadership academy for our players. So she's always, I think, been a coach unofficially, even though, again, she's got no sports background. But I think in her, professional life, she coached a lot of people, she mentored a lot of people, and certainly did that for me, and it continues to.
Yeah, she definitely has, I guess, instilled it within you gratitude and that desire for leadership and interest and curiosity in leadership. I'm curious, you mentioned she was part of that decision around where you went to college, and the coach was really the focal point of that decision. What were the qualities back then that you were looking in a coach that you saw like this is what great coaching is, this is what great leadership is?
I mean, honestly, I really didn't know what I didn't know at that time. So I can answer that question very simply. I was looking for a father figure just because I grew up without a positive, father in my life. But the best thing that my dad ever did for me was give me my name, because it is a unique name that stands out a little bit. But I definitely, when I was going through that process, I think when you grow up that way, you maybe never lose that. You never lose the fact that you're looking to maybe older men, to be mentors or role models for you. I mean, I'm 47 now, and I still, depend in a lot of ways on, you know, coaches or folks that are out there that have put their arm around me and looked out for me. I could kind of rattle off a long list of guys, but that's definitely what I was looking for.
And I imagine that experience of looking for a father figure and finding some great mentors, I mean, that's got to have impacted why you do what you do today, right? And how you show up for your players, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for me, when I was getting close to the end of my playing career in college, it was almost like a mini depression that was starting to set in because my whole identity was as a basketball player, and I did well in school because my mom had taught me the value of academics, and also I've always had a curiosity for learning, so I enjoyed school. I liked class, I liked the professors, I liked those relationships, but make no mistake about it, my identity was strictly as a basketball player, and so as my senior season was coming to a close, it was definitely an identity crisis for me. What am I going to do? Who am I going to be? One of the questions that I try to pose to our guys, to get them thinking maybe a little bit earlier than I did is, who are you and who are you not? Because I think the more you think about that, you realize that, whether it's a basketball player, a basketball coach, or any other, maybe outward identity that one attaches oneself to, that's not actually the core of who you are deep down. But I didn't know that at that time. I was 22 years old. And actually, the coach that recruited me to college had left after my freshman year. It was one of the worst days of my life when he told me he was leaving. The silver lining was he said, "Hey, when you get done playing, you can come work for me and get into coaching." I had no idea what coaching meant or was. All I knew about was practices and games as a
Mhm.
player, but I didn't know at all. And honestly, I didn't even really attach the mentoring part of it, until later on. But once I did make that attachment, and once I did see the value in the impact that as a coach you can make on young guys, and certainly I knew the impact that coaches had had on me. That got me hooked on coaching.
Yeah, and you so I resonate with your story. I was a walk on at the University of South Carolina, then kind of fell into coaching. Same similar identity crisis, like, who am I now? I'm curious over your career as a coach. You think you mentioned a little bit there, like it's kind of evolved. You didn't even know really who you were, that mentorship identity. Like who are you now? Like, and how has that identity as a coach evolved? Because I think for a lot of us in coaching and the coaches that I work with, that is a foundational point. Is when some people ask that question from day one, but most people don't ask it until if they get fired or it's 10 years or 20 years in the job. So how has your identity evolved over time?
That's probably a different podcast, to be honest with you. Um, but I'll tell you this: my identity. I'm not a basketball coach. I'm not um, even Shaka. That just happens to be my name. Um, Basketball is something that I truly enjoy. The relationships with the players is something that I can't even really envision my life without. But again, it's not me. Who I am is um, a being that's talking to you right now while you're in Dublin, Ireland, and Nate's in Iowa on a Zoom on a computer, um, and just being present and enjoying this experience. Um, I think once you can loosen the identity that you have with whatever it is you do for a living or whatever it is you're striving for, it actually frees you to be better and to focus more on others and trying to help them. So that's probably not what you were asking. You were probably asking me to describe how I go about things as a coach. um, and for that, I simply could give you our three core values, which are my three core values as a coach: relationships, growth, and victory.
When you build a culture at Marquette, and obviously have a history of building strong culture everywhere that you've been, um, it takes some discernment to recruit to that culture. When you're looking at guys, and obviously that the landscape of college basketball has evolved so rapidly in the last 10 years, and really in the last couple of years. But how do you go about trying to find the right guys that fit the culture that you want to create there at Marquette?
Well, the people in your organization, in our case, players, coaches, support staff, they're going to determine probably 90% at least of your culture. So the number one component of culture is who you add and subtract from your organization. There's two other components that I can speak to you about later if you'd like. But how we go about adding people is quite simply we work backwards from what we want and who we want to be. So, again, relationships, growth, and victory are the three things that matter most to us. So, we try to attract guys and kids that come from families that really, really value those same things. We live in a day and time in college athletics when there are certain other things that are being valued and are taking precedence. And I'm not saying that those things are not important, but it's very, very critical to us that, again, we attract young men from families that truly do want to go somewhere where they're part of something larger than themselves, truly do want to have lifelong relationships with their teammates first and foremost, and then with their coaches and support staff, truly have a burning desire to grow and develop first as a person and then as a player. And then, you know, definitely, not the last thing being the least important, but winning, victory. We want guys that truly value victory in everything they do. Not just on game night, not just when you're playing your rival or you're in the NCAA tournament, but literally every day, being a winner and doing what goes into winning.
Hmm. One of the things when you talk about relationships there, this has been I think, a place of awareness for me that I've grown in my career is for a long time, I valued the relationship with players and certainly invested in that. We still do that in lots of different ways in our program. But I've realized over the last few years, there's a responsibility, I think, for me, if I value relationships, to also help facilitate the relationships between players. And, when you're at the college level and you're bringing in guys with diverse backgrounds and all kinds of different family context and working with young 18 to 22-year-old men, like that's not necessarily a skill set that they naturally have. So, what are things that you do in order to help facilitate the growth of relationships between your players when they come into the program?
Nate, you and I have that in common. That's been one of the biggest revelations of my coaching career especially since I've been a head coach. Because again, when I played, the most important relationship to me was me and my coach. And that's again because of my background coming from a single mom. I looked at the coach like he was 10 feet tall. I cared more about what he thought than anyone else in the universe. What I've realized over time since I got into coaching is most guys are not like that. Most guys, they much more value the relationship with their teammates. And those are going to be lifelong relationships. Not that they won't stay in touch with their coaches, not that they won't, maybe invite their coach to their wedding when they get married, but it's really their teammates that determine the quality of the experience they have. And in a lot of cases, the quality of how they play on the court. And so, how do we cultivate that? The old fashioned way, spending time together. Um, we believe in scheduling team activities. Our guys do a lot of stuff together on their own organically, which is awesome. But we make sure that every week, at least once a week, sometimes more often, we do some sort of team activity off the court. And it could be anything from last week, we went fishing as a group. It was hilarious seeing all those guys out there in boats and casting their fishing lines out in the water and reeling in fish. Um, we, do silly things like we went strawberry picking last summer. We went axe throwing, last winter. We did a cooking class together. Sometimes it's as simple as just a team meal at somebody's house or going out to eat. And then about every third week, we make our team activity players only. And again, what I realized is like sometimes as coaches, we think we're at the center of everything, but we're really not. The players are. And those players only dinners, particularly um, when they're phone free, are really good for developing the connection you're talking about.
So much good stuff. I love that you shared there. Yeah, you can do some fun activities, axe throwing, fishing. I love that. It's probably some new experiences, which I think challenges young people in different ways, right? I always talk to coaches around team culture time, and sometimes it's just doing hard things, and hard things is sometimes doesn't necessarily mean running up a mountain, but it's just doing something new that puts somebody outside their comfort zone. And I'm sure for a lot of your young men, like cooking was definitely putting them outside their comfort zone, right? When they're used to their meals being prepared for them, by the school cafeteria. But when you think about uh, that creating those conditions in the relationship, I love that removing the technology, like even just removing the coaches from the room. I think that's great. Just I know so many coaches are come with their skeptical mindset of like, well, yeah, how do you know that they're actually going to follow through on those types of things? How do you know what's going to happen in that room is going to be always healthy? How do you get to a place where you can trust your players with that time, with that space, to meet the standards, to do things the right way when they're together?
Well, if you can't trust them in that space, then you got bigger problems than that. I mean,
Mhm.
I think, and again, this has been a a transition for me. I've been a head coach going on my 16th year. Um, Letting go of control. We try to control too many things as coaches, and if we can't trust our players to be alone together, doing the right things, having the right conversations, um, and even themselves determining what those right and wrong things are, not necessarily us, then again, you're going to have bigger issues because what you're asking your guys to do at the most, pressure packed, intense, um, emotional moments is go perform together in front of thousands and thousands of people and go do something really hard against another talented team that wants to do the same thing. So it's easy for me to trust that because what's the alternative?
Yeah. Well, you hit two, I think, really important pieces. One is letting go of this illusion of control, like we don't actually. but then you're also doing some certain things to create the conditions, right? For the good things to actually happen, right? So you're bringing the right people in, right? Which you mentioned earlier.
Yeah,
Um,
it goes
yeah,
back to what Nate said. And again, this is why in building and sustaining culture, it's 90% of it is who you add and subtract from your team. So, to Nate's point, if we add the wrong guys and then we send them out to dinner on their own, then yeah, it might not be the right conversation, or it might not actually build connection. It might tear certain things down. But that's
mhm.
our responsibility. I think one of the most empowering things that leaders can do, particularly whether you're the head coach, you're a CEO, but if you are the leader, the quote unquote person in charge, which I believe everyone should be a leader, but let's just say you're the boss, then adopting a level of extreme responsibility for everything and everyone in your program, knowing that a lot of it is not under your control, but it is absolutely your responsibility. And if it doesn't go well, if it doesn't go right, that's something that, again, is your responsibility and is on you. So I think once you can accept that and own that, then you can make the decisions you need to make with your staff, with your team, to try to push the right direction.
I want to ask you about this. You've mentioned this phrase already a couple of times that there's so many things in coaching that are outside of our control. I think back even to your Final Four run at VCU. If Robbie Hummel plays for Purdue, you might not have that memory, right? And so,
I
you know,
disagree with that, Nate.
oh, okay,
We won
fair
that
enough,
game by like 22, man.
sure.
You
But
can
it's one
ask
of those
those guys. We were winning that night.
but it's one of those things where I think sometimes the complexity of the game and the complexity of culture, there's so many variables at play that we s- we strive for, we reach for, but so often it's like grabbing jello, and as a coach, we have to not only just let go of some of those things, but be at peace with that, that there's just an uncertainty to what we're doing. How do you handle, I mean, you have this awareness of not everything's under our control, but yet you seem at peace with that at the same time. How do you get to a place like that as a coach?
Well, for me personally, I have an extensive morning routine that I have to follow to help myself get in the right place to execute and follow through on the stuff that we're talking about. So, I think again, as we get older, one of the things that we learn is we used to think when we were younger that we rolled out of bed as the best version of ourselves as a player or as a coach or as a leader. And it's just not the case. Because think about it, how much have we evolved over time and how much have we learned some of the concepts that we're talking about right now? And we have to continually reset to remind ourselves to follow through on those things. So for me, I might seem like I'm at peace, but trust me, the early mornings, like 3, 4, 5 in the morning, I have extreme anxiety on most mornings. And so what I have to do is I have to wake up, I have to go through my morning routine. I've got to make sure I'm in a good place before I even get in my car to come to work.
I love what you're sharing there and smiling. It was a big smile came across my face because this is something I'm advocating so much for coaches is the idea of some sort of morning routines and rituals. For me, it's been an absolute game changer to incorporate mindfulness practices and reading and stuff like that. Everyone has stuff that works for them, but what has really worked well and helped you in your growth and development as a leader and as a human being?
Well, first of all, JP, I want to plug you because I just found out a couple minutes ago that you are an executive coach. And I would say this to any coaches that are listening or leaders in other areas. 4 years ago, only because of the COVID shutdown, I started working with an executive coach. I don't think I would have done it if we weren't all in our homes,
Mhm.
communicating like this over the computer. And a friend of mine said to me, "Hey, you really should talk to this man. He's an executive coach. He works with coaches. He works with CEOs, and I think he could help you be more organized and help you with organize your thinking." And so I started doing that in 2020, and it has been terrific for me. So I have a lot of respect for what you do. My morning routine was, kind of developed over time over the last 6, 8 years. And again, the impetus behind this was everyone has their time of day that's the hardest for them mentally. And for me, for whatever reason, it's early in the morning, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the morning, and my mind wakes me up. And I'm not alone in that. I mean, we a lot of us have that. Um, and so what I found was instead of like tossing and turning and trying to make myself go back to sleep, trying to shut off my brain, trying to fight the reality of whatever it was, I should just get up. Even if it's 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, just get up. And I might need to make up on some sleep at some point later. But I wasn't going to get much of a quality of rest anyway. And so my routine currently today is when I get up, the first thing I do is if it's light outside or if it's starting to get light outside, I go outside and I get morning light. And it is extremely powerful to get sunlight. And even if it's not sunny, to get rays of light or particles of light in your eyes. It has been proven what it does for your body on a cellular level. And so I go out and I just walk around for about 15 minutes. I'm fortunate to live near Lake Michigan. So I walk around by the lake and just try to appreciate nature, um, the animals, the plants, different things. Then I go inside back into my house and I do meditation. And so I meditate somewhere between 12 and 20 minutes every morning. And again, that's just the practice of sitting and noticing and accepting, being aware of what's going on both in my mind, in my body, outside of my body. I do it with my eyes closed, but any sounds, any sensations, um, smells, anything. Then from there, I go to what I call my spiritual reading. I've got probably a few or 4 or 5 dozen books that all center around the topic of, again, who am I and who am I not? Some of them are sports related books, like The Inner Game of Tennis, and some of them have really nothing directly to do with sports, like the Tao Te Ching. It was written, thousands of years ago. Um, and so I pick a book. Most of them I've already read. So I just kind of reread different sections. And then what I like to do is I take a picture with my phone of one of the excerpts that I read that morning. And I like to send it to the people that I would call my spiritual community, which is our players, a bunch of former players, our coaching staff, support staff, some family members, and some other strays that I picked up along the way. Then the one other thing I do in my morning routine is I write in my journal, and I just write about whatever's on my mind. So it might be something. Usually, it's something related to our team or coaching, because that tends to kind of predominate my mind. Um, or it might be something that I'm grateful for, or something dealing with my family, something I'm dealing with. Um, but I found that the journal writing is so incredibly powerful to um, help as a bridge towards full acceptance. Because acceptance only works if it's 100%, doesn't work at 99%. And the mind has a tendency to resist. And so I've something about writing things down um, on paper that is really helpful to me and I think to others. I've gotten my players into journaling. It's really helpful to allow you to just come to grips with what is in the current moment, including what you're thinking.
Okay, so we're going to pause our conversation there. And there's one thing that I really want to highlight, though, in the first part of our interview, and that is this idea of executive coaching, like coaching for coaches. There's a lot of confusion on what is executive coaching and where a coach can find a coach. I know that I've actually learned a lot about this over the last few years. First, executive coaching or leadership coaching uh, is not mentorship or consulting. It does not require any knowledge of the subject matter at all. Executive coaches would, and I think over 40% of Fortune 500 companies use executive coaches for their leaders. Now, executive coaches, they are trained through institutions like I was trained through Georgetown University. Now, all executive coaches, they're also certified through the International Coaching Federation. And I'm sharing this because when Shaka says he hired an executive coach, he isn't hiring someone with basketball experience or potentially coaching experience. The person that he's hiring as an executive coach, he is hiring someone who uses coaching questions, coaching presence, coaching tools and frameworks that they've learned and been trained on to help and guide him as a leader. Now, I'm explaining this because of two big reasons. One is that many coaches believe they have a coach, but what they really have is a mentor, someone with a lot of wisdom and experience in the profession, or they have a consultant. Now, a coach can be both of those things. I know that's sometimes my role for many of the people that I work with. Still, mentorship is different than coaching. Shaka has a lot of mentors. The coach serves a different purpose in his life and his leadership. Secondly, this is important because the question a lot of people ask is like, where do I find a coach? Or where do I find a coach that I can afford? And the answer is it's actually quite easy to find. Like all you have to do is Google find a leadership coach, and it's going to show you a bunch of organizations that are going to help match you with a certified executive coach who can suit your challenges and even your budget. This is how my wife found her coach in her leadership role at Google. And this is how many other leaders find coaches for themselves. And I'm sharing this because I don't want this to seem like an advertising, like I'm advertising for my own coaching services, because not only do I have very limited availability, but I recognize I'm not a great fit for a lot of coaches. I, like Shaka, I truly just want to encourage coaches to find and hire an executive coach. Now, if you are interested in learning more about my coaching and consulting services, you can reach out via my website or email. Also, Betsy Butterick, our other co-host, she's a certified executive coach, and you can reach out to her on her website, betsybutterick.com. And if we're not the right fit for your budget or needs, or we don't have availability, we have a bench of other coaches that we can recommend for you. So just food for thought and consider that. All right, that's enough for today's episode. Next episode, we will be back for the second part of our conversation with Shaka Smart. Thank you so much for listening in. Please be sure to subscribe to this podcast if you don't already, and share today's episode with some other coaches and leaders who will find some value in it.